Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvrajagacharya Asatarasata Shishimad Abhay Charanarvinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chayeva Narottamam Deving Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayed. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us first offer our respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Nara Narayan Rishi, the supermost human beings, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayeshvabhadreshu Nityang Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. By regular attendance in the classes of the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering of service unto the pure devotees, all that is inauspicious within the heart is practically destroyed, and loving devotional service unto the glorious Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idang Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Samitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Danyang Swastyayanam Mahat. This Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of God, and it was compiled by the incarnation of God, Srila Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. So today we're reading from text number 36. Okay, very good. The bookmark was in 35, and I was like, uh-oh. Anuvratanam Shishyanam Putranam Cha Dvijottama Anaprishtam Api Bruyur Guravo Dinavatsala Anuvratanam Shishyanam Putran. Oh, did I say Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudeva? I did that already. Sorry. Anuvratanam Shishyanam Putranam Chadvi Jottama Anaprishtam Api Bruhyur Guravo Dinavatsala Anuvratanam Shishyanam Putranam Cha Dvijottama Anaprishtam Api Bruhyur Guravo Dinavatsala. Anuvratanam Shishyanam Putranam Cha Dvijottama Anaprishtam Api Bruhyur Guravo Dinavatsalaha Anuvratanam Shishanam Gautama Anuvratanam Shishanam Putranam cha dvijottama Guravo dinavatsala. Vaishnavis. Anuvratanam Shishyanam Putranam cha dvijottama Anaprishtam api brujyor Guravo dinavatsala Anuvratanam Shishyanam Putranam cha dvijottama Anaprishtam api brujyor Guravo dinavatsala Anuvratanam Shishyanam Putranam cha dvijottama Anaprishtam api brujyor Guravo dinavatsala Anuvratanam Shishyanam Putranam cha dvijottama Anaprishtam api brujyor Guravo dinavatsala Anuvratanam Shishyanam Putranam cha dvijottama Anaprishtam api brujyor Guravo dinavatsalaha Anuvratanam, the followers, Shishyanam, of the disciples, Putranam, of the sons, Cha, also, Dvija Uttama, O best amongst the Brahmanas, Anaprishtam, that which is not asked for, Api, in spite of, Bruhyu, please describe, Gurava, the spiritual masters, Dinavatsala, who are kind to the needy. Translation. O best among the Brahmanas, those who are spiritual masters are very kind to the needy. They are always kind to their followers, disciples, and sons. And without being asked by them, the spiritual master describes all that is knowledge. Please repeat. O best among the Brahmanas, those who are spiritual masters are very kind to the needy. They are always kind to their followers, disciples and sons, and without being asked by them, the spiritual master describes all that is knowledge. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There are many subjects to be known from the bona fide spiritual master. The followers, disciples, and sons are all on one level for the bona fide spiritual master, and he is always kind to them and always speaks to them on transcendental subjects, even though he is not asked by them. That is the nature of the bona fide spiritual master. Vidura appealed to Maitreya Muni to speak on subjects about which he might not have asked. Om Ajnanatimrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangsha Shri Rupam Sagratatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitang Tang Sajevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshri Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. I feel a little bit like an ant in a room full of elephants. Srila Prabhupada's dancing elephants. and Srila Prabhupada is making everyone dance, and I'm going, ah. This verse is a part of the questioning that Vidura is putting to Maitreya Muni, asking him to explain so many things about the material nature, about the spiritual nature, and about how to attain, how to go from the material nature to the spiritual nature. And so this particular verse is very instructive, actually, for all of us, since Srila Prabhupada wanted that everybody in the movement become spiritual masters. And to a certain extent, every one of us is a spiritual master, because we know more than the person, who knows nothing about Krishna. I can remember once when I'd only been in the movement probably about a month, and I went to a temple in Montreal. I joined in the Ottawa temple, and we went down to the Montreal temple, and for the Sunday feast, Sunday program, and I was with Lakshminath Prabhu. I don't know if you know Lakshminath Prabhu, but great devotee from Montreal and Ottawa. Anyway, he and I got the feast, and we were sitting down, and we were just ready to dig in and start, just talking with each other. And Shivaram came along and said, "What are you doing?" And well, we're taking the feast. He goes, "Oh, see that guy over there? He has nobody to talk to." And we're like, "Yeah, but you want me to go and talk to him?" and he said, "Listen, you're in the movement. He's not. So you know more than him, so go talk to him." So very quickly and early on, and in fact, in the Ottawa temple, it was a very small temple. There was only the temple president, vice president, and 4 devotees. And 4 of those devotees were, 3 of them were bhaktas. So we started giving class very early. I can remember I was still a bhakta after about 2.5 months, or 2 months, and I was giving Srimad Bhagavatam class. And they said, "Just speak your realizations, whatever comes." And it's very good to early on take advantage of that, speaking to people and getting to be comfortable with giving Krishna consciousness to others like that. Because one day you may end up sitting here, and you want to be ready to be able to give to others. So as much as possible, we need to give Krishna consciousness to others. And that's what this verse is talking about, is that the spiritual master is very kind to the needy. And who are the needy? Anybody? The ignorant, right. And that is pretty much everybody. And I still consider myself extremely ignorant in Krishna consciousness, but everybody is needy. and because of their ignorance. And they're needy also because that ignorance has locked them in a state of lacking pure love. Everybody wants to be loved, right? I mean, there's all the songs on the radio and everything, they're all talking about love. Of course, it's a totally misdirected love, but it's still, everybody is trying to search for that satisfaction that somebody loves me. And Krishna is the reservoir of that love. Krishna Prema, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the ocean of the nectar of devotion. And that devotion is a two-way street between us and Krishna. So Krishna is ready to give us that ocean of nectar, that ocean of love. But are we ready to take it? Srila Prabhupada is potent, so potent, he had Krishna completely, he saw Krishna constantly and was communicating with Krishna, and he could give Krishna to anybody and at any second. He said, you can become Krishna conscious in a second. The problem is, are we ready to give up everything in a second? Generally, we kind of have to go, well. But Srila Prabhupada got us within this movement. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness is just the society for the association of devotees. And by that association, we increase our readiness to receive Krishna consciousness from Srila Prabhupada and through the parampara. So Srila Prabhupada said that actually it's like boiling the milk, right? And so if you were to put the lemon juice, if you're making curd and you're boiling the milk, it has to come to a boil before you can put in the lemon juice to make the curd. So if you put in the curd when the milk is cold, and then bring it to boil, you still will get curd, but it takes a long time and it's like that. But if you wait until it's boiling and you put it in, it's ready, the curd happens immediately. So similarly, our sadhana is the process by which we are boiling our own milk. We're trying to become ready to receive the mercy and the love that is coming from Krishna through the parampara. And so Vidura, through his question to Maitreya, is actually delineating some of the qualities that a spiritual master should have. So a spiritual master should be very, very kind. And Srila Prabhupada was so kind to everyone that he met. He would honestly try to just give everybody Krishna. He didn't ever think of giving anybody anything else but Krishna. And because he knew that they were in need of Krishna. They were the needy. Like Maharaj said, the ignorant. They were ignorant and they needed Krishna. And it sometimes behooves us to figure out exactly what each individual needs in terms of coming to Krishna consciousness. So somebody, like myself, for example, I can remember I was interested in yoga and spiritual life and everything before I met the devotees. But when I first saw devotees, a lot of people are immediately attracted and they go, oh, what is it that you're into? And, tell me more about it. And they become attracted to Krishna consciousness that way. I was the exact opposite. I walked by the first kirtan party that I saw and I went, woohoo, crazy. So anytime you see somebody on the street going by going, hey, you guys are crazy, just think that someday that guy might be a devotee. But I used to avoid the devotees like the plague. Like if they were coming down the street in Montreal, I was going to McGill University, and I was sometimes walking back through what they call the ghetto, and the temple was part of that ghetto area, the student ghetto. And so I'd be walking down the street, and sometimes there'd be a devotee walking down the street, and if they were coming on my sidewalk, I'd cross the street to get to the other side. I completely avoided them. It wasn't until Krishna arranged total arrangement by Krishna that I met somebody who had been in a temple, but as we said in the old days, he had blooped. But he was, had hair. He had neck beads on, but he was wearing regular clothes, wasn't wearing tilak. And he sat down beside me on a park bench one day and he said, you see that bee that's flying around from flower to flower? He got that body because of desires from his previous life. And I was like, whoa, what did you just say? and immediately that sparked my interest. And he spoke for 2 hours about Krishna consciousness without ever mentioning Krishna. And then finally, actually, we were in Nanaimo and we were waiting for the ferry. Nanaimo's on Vancouver Island, and we were waiting for the ferry to go back to Vancouver. And we'd gotten on the ferry, and I think sometimes that perhaps it was because I was now a captive audience. I wasn't going to jump off the ferry and swim to shore if he mentioned Krishna. So the name Krishna kind of slipped out. And as soon as he said Krishna, I went, wait a minute, you mean those guys with the robes and the shaved heads and the stuff? Yeah, they know all this? And he said, yep, and there's books about it and everything. And I was like, oh no, I've been running away from those guys. So needless to say, the next time I saw devotees, I ran right up to them, and I did do that. And in fact, I probably would have joined a year earlier if those devotees had been a little more persuasive. In 1973, I met them in a park in Banff, Alberta. I don't know if you know where Banff is, but it's a beautiful spot in the Rocky Mountains, and I was working at the Banff Springs Hotel. And I saw the devotees, and they were having a kirtan in the park, and there were a whole bunch of people around. I was just riding my bike by, and I saw, Hare Krishna. Boom. I just pulled right in, and I came up, and they just finished the kirtan, and they gave a little talk, and then they said, anybody who wants to chant, come on into the middle. And so myself and one other elderly lady came in and sat down with them. Nobody else. And there were probably 200 people in the crowd watching. But as soon as they said anybody else come in, everybody just stayed back. But myself and this other lady came in, and we sat down and started chanting. And then after 10 or 15 minutes, they just kind of packed it up. Well, we got to go now. So they packed everything up, put it in the van. I helped them carry things to the van. If they had said, hey, come on, get in the van, I probably would have gone, okay. I would have left my bike on the street and everything. But that didn't happen. Krishna thought I was still cold milk. I still needed a little burning by the material energy before I took to Krishna consciousness. And so, Srila Prabhupada arranged and Krishna arranged that I eventually, met some people and started gradually coming to the temple in Ottawa and joined the temple. But Krishna just figures out for each and every one of us what it is that we need. I mean, he knows that we need him, of course, but he also knows that each one of us approaches him at our own pace. And we need to be ready to try to pick up our pace when we can. But also, there's times when we just know that I just can't do that. And for instance, I'm married, and I'm getting on, and I have had devotees say to me, when are you going to take sannyas? And but many of you may know my wife, Purnamasi, and she's had a stroke, and she requires a lot of care. I mean, a fair amount of care. She'll probably make it to the morning program tomorrow. She was a little tired this morning. But she just requires a certain amount of care. And if I wasn't looking after her, there might not be anybody to really take care of her. And so, I feel that is a great service to Srila Prabhupada, that I'm looking after this. She's an amazing devotee of Krishna. And my service to her is service to Srila Prabhupada and service to Krishna. So it is a very purifying process, of course, when you're really engaged in helping somebody. I mean, there's been times recently, just within the last 2 years, she's broken a hip, and, she tends to fall because of the stroke. Sometimes she uses a cane, but she still tends to go down sometimes, and she's also broken her shoulder. And so she's, definitely had times when, I have to even feed, there was a time when I had to feed her with a spoon, So it really is a very purifying and surrendering process. And this question by Vidura to Maitreya is not sort of worded as a question, and yet it's part of the whole questioning that's going on here, because in the word for word, it's said the word bruhu, please describe. So it's not really included in the translation, that Vidura's asking Maitreya, please describe that. But he is actually asking him to, describe that the spiritual masters are very kind, and they're always kind of their followers and sons. And without being asked by them, the spiritual master describes all that is knowledge. So he's basically saying, there's many things I may have missed. There's many questions I may not have asked, because the subject matter is practically unlimited, right? So there's some questions here that I may not have touched upon, but please answer them also, even though I may not be specifically asking. So it's setting up a whole further, the whole rest of the Bhagavatam practically is being set up by these questions by Vidura to Maitreya. And it is, Srila Prabhupada often at the end of a class would ask, so are there any questions? And he really was kind upon any devotee, or he really liked devotees who asked questions. But oftentimes, Srila Prabhupada had explained everything so perfectly. I mean, there were a few times I was sitting in class, and I never, ever had the wherewithal to come up with a good question. But Srila Prabhupada would, as it's described here, the spiritual master describes all that is knowledge, even without our asking. So we were there, Srila Prabhupada spoke, and he just gave us the knowledge of Krishna. And he continues to give this movement the knowledge of Krishna through his books and through his disciples. Everybody, each one of us is trying to give Krishna consciousness to others. And when I say disciples, I mean grand disciples also, and great-grand disciples, and it'll go on for many thousands of years. So it's extremely important here that Vidura is asking these questions. And it's so important for us to even ask questions of ourselves. Oftentimes, it's a very good exercise to put yourself in the position of speaking to somebody else, and they're asking challenging questions. So you should think to yourself, ask the challenging questions, and oftentimes ask yourself, why am I here? Why am I doing what I am doing today? And constantly come up with answers as to why you're doing what it is you're doing today. Why are we engaged in Krishna consciousness? We should be constantly asking ourselves that and reinforcing ourselves by getting the answers. Either we can answer it within our mind. Sometimes we know the answer and we give the answer to ourselves, or we don't know the answer, and so we go to Srila Prabhupada's books and we go, I know that Srila Prabhupada will give me the answer. And so it's a constant self-evaluation. We have to keep evaluating ourselves. Am I advancing in Krishna consciousness? And advancement in Krishna consciousness does not mean, advancement in the material world means that if you're advancing in your job or something, that you're rising above everybody else, and you're kind of everybody else, you're above everybody else, and you can put them down and you can tell them what to do and everything else. But advancement in Krishna consciousness is not that. In fact, it is the exact opposite. How much am I becoming a servant of everybody else? Am I really learning to serve? Am I really learning to give, Krishna consciousness to everybody? And am I humble enough that I can go out on the street and I can approach anybody about Krishna consciousness? Or am I shy? Shyness, they say, is a sign of pride, because you don't want to do anything that's going to put yourself in a vulnerable position. But true humility means putting yourself in a vulnerable position always. And I think one of the most vulnerable things we can do is approaching somebody cold on the street about Krishna consciousness. And it's a difficult thing to do. But if we can do it, then you're touching possibly that person with Krishna consciousness for the very first time in the eternity that they have spent in the material world. For the very first time, you're actually touching their soul. And you're actually giving that love that is, what Srila Prabhupada and all the spiritual masters give to the needy. You are actually giving that pure love. And if we go with that attitude of love, that I love this guy. Like this guy may be coming down the street, and he's all like, hey, and he's got his earphones in, and he's like, and he's rocking to the tunes, and you're like, excuse me? And he's like, what? and you go, hey, here's a book. And you try to get the book in their hands, because if they just even touch the book, Srila Prabhupada said, then their life is changed. That means they've come completely in contact with Krishna. And if somebody comes completely in contact with Krishna, then they, again, in their next life will get the same opportunity. So you have completely wiped out a whole lot of karma that person may have had, and, in their going through the sojourn of life after life. And now they're guaranteed a human body in their next life just by getting the book in their hand. It's so potent. It's so potent. We don't really grasp sometimes how potent Krishna consciousness is. It's like when we say the holy name, we're saying Krishna, and we're thinking that it's heard, here and there, by maybe the few of us in this room. But the holy name is unlimited and is not limited by this room. It's not limited by the atmosphere. It's not limited by this solar system. It's not limited by the universe. When I say Krishna, it's resounding throughout the entire universe. Do you know that? It's actually resounding through the entire universe. It's not limited at all. And that's why when we're chanting Hare Krishna, there's so much potency to be had. And if we take that potency and we go out and we give it to somebody else, just ask them, hey, can you chant this? If you have a mantra card or you have a book and it has the mantra in it, and you show them, hey, can you just, say this, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. How potent that is. And I do work in a hospital, or I did. I'm retired now. I retired last August. And I was working as a respiratory therapist in the intensive care at the hospital for sick children. And there was, this is a different story than the one I told you. But this is a story about how the holy name is not bound by anything material. And so this one boy, he was 15 years old, and he was super smart. He had already gone through all high school, and he was ready to go into university. He was about to turn 16, and he was going into university the next year. So a super, super smart kid, but something happened. It's a condition where he got blisters, and the blisters covered his body. It's an autoimmune reaction. And the blisters actually went in his mouth and started going down his throat. And then we put him on a breathing machine. And then the blisters went all the way down into his lungs, and they blistered his lungs, and they completely filled his lungs with fluid, so the point where we were not able to push air into him with a ventilator anymore. And so at Sick Kids, we have a thing called ECMO. I don't know if any of you have heard about it. It made the news a little bit because of COVID. ECMO is where we put a cannula in the artery in the vein, in the jugular vein, and it goes down to this side of the heart. And then we put another catheter in the carotid artery, and it goes down into the root of the aorta. And what we do is we draw the blood out and oxygenate it, take all the carbon dioxide out of it, and then pump it back in on this side of the heart. And the heart's still pumping a bit, so the blood that goes in on this side of the heart does get pumped around the body. And so we were keeping him alive like that. And his mother was Sikh. The whole family was Sikh. And they had some of the Sikh, reading, I think, of the Guru Granth Sahib, the recordings of the readings of the Guru Granth Sahib playing for him. But I always, when I was working, I always wore a shirt. I wore this shirt sometimes. I wore Hare Krishna, with the Hare Krishna up here in the Balaram font, and then in the back, it has the whole Maha Mantra. And so this Sikh mother saw my shirt, and she goes, "You're Hare Krishna?" And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "Can you chant for my boy?" And I happen to be an ECMO specialist, and I normally work night shift, so I was working all night long. And now that I had permission, I was always chanting at work, but I was chanting kind of quietly. But, everybody knew I was a devotee, but I didn't kind of push things too much. But now, at the hospital for sick children, if a parent asks for something for the child, then the child gets it. Whatever it is, the child gets it. They try to give whatever they can to the child. So once the mother asked me, I can chant, I said, "Oh, no problem." So I was chanting my japa, and instead of going, "Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna," I was going, "Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare." And there's like 4 other nurses and, doctors in the rooms, and there's 4 other patients. But I was, I wasn't chanting too loud, but I definitely was audible throughout the entire room. And I chanted to him, and I was working night shift, I worked 3 nights in a row, and he was on this ECMO machine for about 6 or 7 weeks. At that time, it was one of the longest that we had ever kept somebody on ECMO, because it's very tricky, if we have to keep the blood anticoagulated so it doesn't clot in the machine and everything. So, but that also gives cause to bleeding, so oftentimes they have bleeding problems, they get a bleed in the brain and they die. So, but we managed to balance him just right, and we got him through, and he came off after 6 weeks on this machine. And so he gradually got better and got out of the hospital, and a year later, the doctors called up his mother and said, "We'd like him to come to speak to us about his condition." And, from a first-hand point of view about how it was, what it was like getting this, because it's a pretty rare condition. So the doctors wanted to hear about what it feels like to actually get this. And so he said, "Sure, I'll come." And he was downstairs in the hospital giving a talk to a whole auditorium full of doctors. And his mother came up to the intensive care unit to thank the doctors and everybody. And she saw me, and she called me over. She said, "Oh, come." And I came over, and she said, "Thank you so much for taking care of my boy." And I was like, "Well, that's what we're paid to do." And she said, No, you're chanting. It was so special. He's down there telling the doctors all about what goes on, in his disease. But, the doctors even said he won't remember anything because in the ICU, when the doctors called his mother, they said he won't remember anything from the ICU because, for one thing, you get what's called ICU amnesia. And, even if you're not sedated, a lot of times patients who are in the ICU can't even remember what went on in the ICU. And but he was under heavy sedation. I mean, we had him on morphine, on Valium, and just constant, like absolutely constant. It was a constant drip going into him. It never stopped. And for 7 weeks. And so there's no way he's going to remember anything the doctors told his mother in the ICU. But we want to hear about the time to the ICU and the time out of the ICU. And so the mother said, "But he told me that I cannot remember anything from the ICU, but I remember a man chanting Hare Krishna." So it goes beyond all, material considerations. It goes right to the soul. And, and when we're out, Harinam is such an amazing thing. I love to go out on Harinam because even just people hearing the holy name, it completely changes their life. It gives them hope. Even though they may not feel it right away, it actually gives the soul hope that the soul is going to be able to get out of this material cage. And the soul is for the first time, if it's the first time that they hear the holy name, it gives that soul the hope of getting out of the material world. Actually, today's Friday night. Do you guys go out on Friday night for Harinam? Are you going out tonight? 5:30. All right. I'll be there. Love going on Harinam. And so it really is just the greatest gift. And Vidura is talking about how kind, Krishna is, and the spiritual master is the representative of Krishna in giving everything, all that is knowledge, all the knowledge that we need to go back home, back to Godhead. And so we just have to be eternally grateful, eternally thankful to Srila Prabhupada, and just try to do the very best we can. And, this movement is full of great devotees who've written many books and, give classes and do all kinds of seminars and so many different things. But there are so many unsung heroes in Krishna consciousness. Just the devotees who do the little things for Krishna. There's one devotee, and anybody who's been to Mayapur, you probably know, there's one devotee, he's Indian-bodied, and he looks after all the shoes outside of the entrance to the mandir. And, he straightens them. The devotees just come and kick off their shoes, but he'll go and when everybody's running in to greet the deities, and they're just kicking off their shoes, and it becomes a huge mess. And when you come out from Bhagavatam class afterwards, the shoes are all perfectly straight. And it's this one devotee, I've got a picture of him on my phone actually. His name's Kala Chand. And he is such a sweet devotee. I mean, he's just super humble, super nice, and just, and I'm sure a lot of people kind of, especially maybe, the Indian class society, sometimes they look upon, somebody who's working with the shoes out there kind of untouchable, but he is just sweetness personified. He's really, really nice. So, these are the unsung heroes of Krishna consciousness, and each and every one of us can know for certain that Srila Prabhupada and the Parampara are looking at our service, no matter how humble it is. Whether it's just sweeping something or cleaning something or picking up, if we see a little bit of litter in front of the temple, we pick it up. Just every little action like that is actually being noticed by Srila Prabhupada and the Parampara. So we can take shelter in the fact that we are dear to Srila Prabhupada and the Parampara. In fact, there's a letter that was written one time and asking Srila Prabhupada, can we pray to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta to help us in our Krishna consciousness? And Srila Prabhupada replied, oh yes, as your spiritual grandfather, he is more merciful to his grandchildren than he is than he is to his children, to me, Srila Prabhupada was basically saying. Because the spiritual master, it's there's conditions. You've got to please the spiritual master, and sometimes the spiritual master needs to be a little harsh with the devotee in terms of, not super harsh, but harsh enough to coax and encourage people in Krishna consciousness. And sometimes it can feel like, whoa, he's asking a lot, but I've got to try to do it. And but if we do that, Srila Prabhupada is now the grand spiritual master of so many others, and he'll become the great. It'll keep going on as long as ISKCON exists. And he will be noticing each and every one of those great grand disciples' minuscule service, and he has a place in his heart for each and every one of them. So I just hope that we can all be encouraged in our devotional service and remember the potency of the holy name, and we can all go out and bring the potency of the holy name to LA tonight. Jai. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.